Nwosu,
Yes.
hello.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for accepting the invitation. So, did I pronounce your name correctly?
That was, I would say, being honest, I would say it was like 9 out of 10.
Okay,
so that's still very good.
I
for the
practiced.
first time.
I practiced like 50% of the interview. It was just about your name, and then the question. No, we are very happy to have you, to meet you during this Africa Bitcoin conference. Yes.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and we really wanted to talk to you because you have very interesting ideas. You have a huge experience. You are in the industry since what, 2013, if I'm not mistaken.
In the industry since 2013. If it was possible for you to blush right now, I would be, but you just...
Okay, I keep going. So you created several companies, and you are now working on an open source protocol, Fedimint, that you will describe a little bit later. But for the people watching us who do not know you, can you introduce a little bit yourself? Because we are a French community, a French media, so everybody does not know Fedimint, even if we already did a video on it, about it. So can you introduce yourself and walk us through a little bit your journey and when, why, and how you fell into the rabbit hole?
Okay, well, happy to. So my name's Obi Nwosu, as you correctly pronounced earlier. And I am one of the co-founders and CEO of Fedi. And Fedi is looking to bring mass Bitcoin adoption to the world over the coming years. Our objective is 1 billion users using Bitcoin. And we do that through the power of something called Fedimint. And this is, and we'll talk, I'm sure, more about this, but it's a form of community custody that's run by the community as opposed to run by strangers or leaving it all for yourself. Now, my journey is a long one. I was originally a geek. I studied computer science in school, in university, and I was...
In the UK, right?
In the UK, yes, originally. I'm an Anglo-Nigerian, so conceived in Nigeria, born in the UK.
I still understand your English because it could be an issue if you were really with the strong accent. It could be
strong,
difficult.
It could be the strong Nigerian accent or the strong English accent.
Yeah, it could be tough, so that's fine.
I have something called a BBC English accent, received pronunciation, so hopefully it's reasonably clear. But yeah, I studied computer science. I fell in love with computers at an early age. And then I got into the .com space. I've been around .com 1, .com 2, and so on. I was a geek. I was a CTO of various successful .coms until I discovered in 2011 Bitcoin. And that's when I went down the rabbit hole. And 2 years later, I formed a Bitcoin exchange. And that was it went on to become the longest running Bitcoin exchange in the UK. One of the first to be regulated in Europe. At one point, we were doing 70%.
Bitcoin only.
Bitcoin only. There was a period for 9 months where we listed Ethereum. Okay. After a lot of internal politics, I acquiesced. But then after 9 months, I said enough is enough. And we went back to being Bitcoin only. It's quite a big story at the time. And there are many reasons why you had to go Bitcoin only. But I don't call myself a Bitcoin maximalist. I call myself a Bitcoin pragmatist. If you just look at things pragmatically and rationally, really there is no other long-term option other than Bitcoin. So we went back to being Bitcoin only. It was an incredible decision and never looked back since then. Sold it at the end of last year. Because even though it was a great company and I really enjoyed working with the team, because it was based in the city of London, because we were based in Europe, because we had traditional finance investors and so on, the big opportunity I thought for Bitcoin was helping people in the global south or people living under the yoke of authoritarian regimes and dictatorships, and especially people in Africa. And basically, Africa was never going to be our second market after the UK. With a company where all the investors had rarely visited Africa, maybe Europe, maybe France, maybe the United States, but it wasn't going to be, El Salvador or Ghana or Senegal, where I believed, and I think it's going to become clearer and clearer, all the actions happening, all the opportunity. This is where Bitcoin is going to win the battle of hearts and minds first.
In developed countries, like developing countries. you mean?
In the developing countries or countries under the yoke of authoritarian regimes and dictatorships, this is the place where people actually need it right now. And they need it right now for its original use case of payments. They also need it as a store of value, but they need it in all its myriad uses right now. And they also have the experience and skill to be able to deploy it because their lived-in experience has forced them to innovate around how they custody and hold and use money.
Yeah, on the channel, we quite often say that in those countries, like developing countries, the volatility of Bitcoin is not high enough, and the monetary issues locally are compensated. Basically, I don't know, if you have the dollar or euro, you do not switch to Bitcoin because the volatility is too high. I don't know if you are in Central Africa or Venezuela, you do not even care about the volatility because the local currency is even worse.
Yeah, I was born in 1975, and when I was very young, my first few years, so I said I was conceived in Nigeria, and I would visit Nigeria very often, and the currency of Nigeria is the Nigerian naira, and at the time, one Nigerian naira was worth more than $1. So one Nigerian naira was worth more than $1. Today, one Nigerian naira is, well, depending on if it's the official price or the black market, $1 US is worth 400 naira or more. So, and Nigeria is the largest economy in Africa. It's one of the best performing, and it's lost, 99.75% of its value in the last 40 years or so. And that's a well-performing currency in Africa. And that's compared to the US dollar, which has also lost value over that same period of time. Yeah. So it's not great.
2 years ago, you were tweeting, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. It was 2 years ago. And you were saying that we were at the second to the last stage in this process. So we are around 2 years later, and you were saying that we would win around 2023, 2024. Are we really in the stage where local powers and the status quo is fighting against Bitcoin, for example, in those countries, like not willing to make this switch? How do you see the situation right now?
Well, first of all, are we in the phase where people are fighting us and Bitcoin and the people who can benefit from Bitcoin? The answer, I think now, if you asked a few years ago, people were still questioning me, but I think now it's very clear there's a fight happening. However, you're fighting an idea, so you have to fight that not with nuclear missiles and machine guns. You have to fight it with misinformation and with regulation. And so when you look around, is there a lot of misinformation about Bitcoin? Yes. Is there an increasing unreasonable regulation for Bitcoin? Yes. So the fight is happening. Now, and the exact details of how it was going to happen when I made that prediction in 2020, I couldn't know. But I just felt, looking at my experience from 2011 and how it progressed, it looked like the crescendo point, the peak, was going to hit in 2023. Now, with the latest events of the last few months, with the advice and recommendations from multiple unelected global bodies, like the World Bank, like the Financial Action Task Force,
BCE, the last report, I don't know if you have seen,
like the BCE, and so on and so forth, the ECB, and so on. You can see that they're all very clearly lining up to put in place increased, unreasonable levels of regulation. And that crescendo point is 2023. So to answer your original question, I'm absolutely convinced that the end battle, if you've got this sort of Avengers Assemble, that last battle, end game, is 2023. And we could lose. Bitcoin could lose the battle. That was my next question. It is possible. And in any battle, you could lose. But I believe, and actually, and this is what I talk about here, I believe that with the help of the Global South, with the help of people living under the yoke of authoritarian regimes and dictatorships, and especially with the help of Africa, Bitcoin will win.
What do you mean by the help of the African continent? Like, what does it mean? It's like, if people are using it in Africa, so there will still be this seed growing from there?
So,
if it's forbidden in the US and in Europe?
This is one thing that excites me even more. Not only is we talk about Bitcoin and how it can be used in Africa and so on, but for the first time ever, Africa is going to be essential in making Bitcoin win. It's not only does Bitcoin help Africa, but Africa is essential to helping Bitcoin, because we have the experience, we have the knowledge of having to deal with tough, difficult financial situations. So, there's a saying that hard times build strong men, and weak times build, and strong men lead to good times build weak men lead to bad times, and so on. But there's a tale of two worlds happening globally. In the West, from a financial point of view, we are living in good times. We have relatively stable money. We have a plethora of payment options. We have many ways we have financial institutions that, in general, you can trust. So from a financial point of view, that leads us to being not really equipped to fight this battle. But if you go to the global south, or where you don't necessarily have the banking options, or you go to places which are living under the yoke of authoritarian regimes, which are often in the global south as well, but they're post-Soviet regions and so on, again, where you cannot trust your payment options. I have stories of people receiving money from friends and family in the West to Belarus, and they get arrested. And similar things can happen because they went to their bank account, but it's in an authoritarian regime, and it came from someone they didn't like. Same thing happens in Togo. The same thing happens in other places in Africa as well. So in these environments, these are tough times. And if that's from a financial point of view, it's had to lead to innovation. It's had to lead to a whole different mindset of how you deal with finance and financing. And so, for example, you've seen the massive advances in different forms of community banking, village savings and loan schemes. You've seen SACCOs in Senegal and Nairobi
and those kind of
so on, and everything in between, and every place in between. There's tons of innovation here. You have Hawala in Middle East, and so on and so forth. So all of these systems and all this innovation has been built up. At the moment, they're very manual processes. They're very disparate. Something like Fedimint can supercharge those, but the point is that the global south can act like a educator for the rest of the Bitcoin community, to show and lead the way and show them how it is actually possible to live and thrive without relying on all these existing really slick financial systems. And once people see that globally, we have won, and that's next year.
How will the local governments welcome this new technology, like this new payment system, this new store of value? Because for sure, if they do not have any more the control over their currency, for example, in Central Africa, it was one step ahead, two step backwards, basically. So how do you see the situation? It's like, will the local governments empower and embrace Bitcoin, because for them they prefer this than a shitty currency, or like to depend of an external currency? For example, like Salvador, it's like, okay, I do not have my local currency, I cannot create my own, but I do not want neither to use the dollar, which is an external one. So I prefer to have like an independent currency, which is Bitcoin. How will it work in Africa? Will they fight it as well?
So I think different regimes, different countries will act in different ways, and it depends at the end of the day how forward-looking the leadership is. So the more forward-looking they are, the more likely they will realize that this is part of a trend that they can't stop, and so they should get on board. And especially if they're smaller, they might realize that there's this incredible opportunity for them to do that. However, in general, my view is that these leaders will tend to be followers, not instigators. So let's take a different example. Let's take streaming video, so on. Now we use things like Netflix, Disney, etc. And you can have access to a library of tens of thousands of videos, and you pay a few euros a month for 24/7 access to these. And, you know, it's relatively reasonable priced. Now, if you went back in time 20 years or so ago, you would have to go to a Blockbuster video or some sort of video store, and you'd rent one video for 3 days, and it would cost you, you know, 5-6 euros, the amount more than the amount you'll pay for a month now. If you wanted to buy a box set to own it, you know, all episodes of all movies for Die Hard, you know, for example, or Ghostbuster 1 and 2, whatever it may be back in the time. Showing my age there. But you'd pay, you know, 40 euros for this box set. So it was unreasonable price. And because the market was controlled by a few people. Then a technology came out called BitTorrent. And BitTorrent was this open source technology that allowed a different way for people to access these videos. And the music and video industry tried to initially push back against that. And they attempted to push back for a number of years until eventually it became very clear that the more they pushed back, all it did is it increased usage, because it made it very clear to the person in the street that they were impotent. They didn't have actually any real power to control this. So at that point, once they realized that they couldn't stop it and it was going to grow no matter what,
need to change, and
they changed and decided they're going to set up things like Netflix and so on and so forth. And that happened over the following few years. So they then ended up following and not leading. But the key was, when did, even though usage of BitTorrent then still continues, but it reduced because reasonably priced alternatives existed. But if BitTorrent didn't exist, Netflix wouldn't exist. If BitTorrent didn't exist, Disney Channel and so on wouldn't exist. Reasonable regulation wouldn't have come in unless this was a credible alternative. But so the point it became clear was a credible alternative was when the community won, when it came from the information war. And it's the same with the value war. Once it becomes clear that no matter what you do, Bitcoin survives and thrives, no matter who does it, we've won. It might take a few more years for reasonable regulation to come out, and it will be positioned as we're thinking ahead, but regulation will follow when they know that they have no choice. And we have to make it clear that they have no choice other than to treat their constituents reasonably. And that is what's going to happen in 2023.
So Bitcoin is this hole in the wall for you?
Bitcoin is the base. Bitcoin is think of it as a defender. It's defending us. It's this meritocratic money. It's this, you know, it's censorship resistant. It provides self-sovereignty, but it can't do it alone. It needs weapons to help it in the war. It needs lightning, and it also needs something to act like its shield. It needs something to help making custody very simple, making custody very secure, providing privacy as a paramount initial and always there feature. And it also needs to provide a mechanism to it to be extended in ways which, because we know people want to be able to provide specific financial services no matter where they are. So you need to be able to extend it as well. And that is what Fedimint and Fedi provides. It provides that missing piece: custody, simplicity, extensibility, and obviously privacy as a paramount feature.
So before explaining how it works, really technically, to go into the details, how did you have this idea? Like the problem you said, like really in terms of ownership and how you keep your coins, basically. But so explain us a little bit the problem that you are trying to solve, like, and what is the current situation? Okay, so there's two different questions. Yeah. How did the idea come about? Yes. And then what is the problem we're trying to solve? So, but let's start with how the idea came about. First of all, the idea of Fedimint wasn't my idea. One of my co-founders is this incredible guy called Eric Syrian. Well, actually, that's a name.
but Eric Syrian. And he'd been working on this idea for well over a year. I think about a year and a half before I met him. I met him in an event in Prague called Hackers Congress. This is where some of the world's best cypherpunks and hackers meet up once a year, and they show some of the things they're working on, and it's an amazing event. I was in the last stages of selling my exchange. It'd been running for 8 years. It'd been a good time, but I wanted to find a way of focusing on something I'd always been interested in, which was how we could expand and be part of the process of the expansion of Bitcoin across the global south, and so on. And I thought a big part of that was we had to get people off exchanges, because we were heading into this Orwellian nightmare where maybe half a dozen exchanges would be the place where the vast majority of people would store their Bitcoin. And we worry about CBDCs, where a country of 5 million people or 6 million people have the account details and the financial comings and goings of everybody. But we don't realize that we already have a situation which is like that or worse, where many of the top exchanges have tens, if not 100+ million users, and they hold their money. They have full visibility of every transaction they have. And if they allow you to have cards and so on, then they have even more visibility on your financial comings and goings. But the difference between them and a normal country is a country can be, overthrown leadership and so on, but with a company, it's an automatic dictatorship by definition. So we had to get people off exchanges. So I was looking for that solution. So I come along to Hackers Congress, and I bump into Eric Syrian. I tell him some of my ideas. He politely told me how they weren't going to work from a technical point of view. Which
for instance?
No, I mean, I had an idea around using mobile phones as hardware wallets, for example, replacing the SIM with and so the SIM card could be transmitted around logistically more easily because it takes up little space, and old Nokia phones are everywhere. So I thought, well, these could be a cheaper hardware wallet.
You would have like a secured element in a phone. In
a SIM card, and you put that in, and it turns your old mobile phone, which are now everywhere, almost free, could be turned them into hardware wallets because they have input, output, so on and so forth, reducing the cost of hardware wallets down to the cost of a SIM, which is, could be a few pence, for example. But there are reasons why, and not just him, other cypherpunks, well-known cypherpunks also suggested challenges with that idea. But then I asked him what he was working on, and he said he was working on this thing called Fedimint. And in his mind, Fedimint was an incredible privacy solution. And it is. It provides an incredible level of privacy by default. They're using a protocol called Xiaomi and eCash. And we can go into that in more detail, as you said, later. And it requires a group of people to come together to provide that on behalf of a larger group of people. But when I saw that, I realized that he'd effectively created the solution to be able to get people off exchanges. He just hadn't realized it yet. When you add that, when you dovetail that with the sort of community-based banking mindset that is prevalent across the whole of the global south, across Africa, and across post-Soviet regions, again, which are living under the yoke of authoritarian dictatorships, which is the vast majority of the people in the world are living in one of those three groups. That is the majority of the world. The edge case is people living in the West under functioning democracies. That is the edge case. Yeah. This is the
1
norm.
Billion people over the rest of the world.
It's like 1.5 billion versus the other, 5 billion. For the 5 billion who are used to that, this technology applied to that could be an alternative for custodying on an FTX or a BlockFi or any other one that may explode over the coming months.
Because the dilemma was like either you have your coins, your Bitcoin on an exchange, or you have it on a hardware wallet. And the hardware wallet was like either too expensive or too complicated. You do not have like
expensive, complicated,
the technical
or too
knowledge
frightening.
or frightening, as I say. I mean, many people do not want to keep their money.
Is the best if you can do it.
So
but if you can afford it, if you've got a daily income of $10 a day, and you and that's to live off. You may have only a small percentage, if any, to have spare. Then spending $50 to $150 on a hardware wallet just doesn't make sense. So as soon as your price point is $50 or $100, you've excluded hundreds of millions to billions of people. Then there's a technical complexity, and it's getting better all the time, but compared to the alternatives, it's still complex. And then finally, there's a fear. It's like, what did I do
if I lose my keys?
Yeah. What do I do? This, what happens if I die? And so for all these reasons, again, I ran an exchange for 8 years, begging sometimes people to self-custody. I realized that you're probably never going to get to even 10% of people. And so that's why a lot of exchanges say, hey, no, but you can self-custody, because they know that people are not actually going to do it. So
and that's a bit
it's easy to push something that is never going to happen.
And it's insane with all the stories that we had in the past, like Mongox 2014, BitConnect, now FTX. It's like, okay, now people learned. Like,
no, but it's not insane. It's not insane. People are wise. They are able to mentally judge different risks. You have one risk of, if you custody with an exchange, that they can rug pull you or take away the money or so on and so forth. They can, and that is a risk, and that's a constant risk, and that risk happen again and again and again. But there's another risk that if you self-custody, that you could lose all your money as well. And if you're non-technical, not everybody is technical. People in the Bitcoin community tend to be more technical. Or if you then you will actually judge mentally what are the two risks. And it may be that even though it's sort of, neither of them are good options, but you make the call to go with this one because neither are good options. So what is needed is a middle option, which is as easy to use, if not easier than an exchange, but someone could just naturally see that this is going to lead to a similar, if not better, level of security than an exchange provided. But it also provides similar or approaching the level of security of self-custody. It can never be as good, but it approaches that as well. And it provides other things, for example, incredible privacy as well, ease of making transactions with the Lightning Network and so on. Once that option is there, people will then use it. So people are waiting for this option. They don't like either. For most people, the 10% who can go for self-custody, great. But for 90%, one is off the limits for them and the other one they don't like, but they have no other choice. You give them that choice, we've won.
And this choice is Fediment. So how does it work concretely? So how will it be used in the future? How can developers use it to create their own products? So concretely, what it is and how it works.
So Fediment is an open source protocol. And this protocol is, think of it like Lightning protocol or the Bitcoin protocol. You run it on a machine, and just like Bitcoin, it's unattended operation. So once it runs, and it's set up, you never need to touch it again. Now, concretely, what happens is you form a federation, as I say. Let's give you an example. You have a community of 1,000 people, and the community comes together and determines that 4 people within that community, let's say, or 7, let's say 4, are people who should be running this Fediment software. They download the software, and they enter the IP addresses, the locations on the internet, and the public key, which is the public part of their private key to use to make payments, and share that with the other guardians. They all enter that into their Fediment software and click go, and it forms a Fediment federation. Now this Fediment federation...
So it's a box. It's a box with like several private keys to open it.
No. It's, if there's 4 people, different people will have their own Fediment software running. Running on their own machine. So if you think about it in boxes, it's like 4 different boxes that are all communicating and negotiating with each other constantly on an ongoing basis. But it is 4 separate ones. It's not one box. It's not this one centralized service. Compare it to an exchange, where you should think about it as one box run by one person, maybe run by more, but from your point of view, it's one box. With Fediment, you're going to have, in this case, if there's 4 guardians, 4 boxes. If it's 7 guardians, 7 boxes, but they're all working with each other, talking to each other, and making sure that any action that they take, they is always done with agreement between the 7 of them. So no one person can go off and do anything without the approval of the majority of the others.
So this is a parameter that you decide when you are setting up the federation,
yes,
like 2/3, 6/7, 7/.
It's based on the number of people within your community that you can you believe are trusted members of the community who can run this software. There are sort of for statistical reasons good numbers to have. So we think 4 people is probably the minimum. 7 is going to be a sweet spot for some people, and for some really, really large groups, maybe 10. But if you think about something like one of the big exchanges, behind the scenes, behind all the advertising and so on, and the tens of millions of customers and billions being stored by them, there is likely 4 or 6 people or 7 people who are actually handling the custody. If that, in the case of FTX, it seemed like there was only 1, Quadriga only 1, Mt. Gox only 1, which is really bad, but hopefully there's 3 or 4. So you're getting the same level of assurances in terms of custody that you would get from an exchange who's custodying hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of times more with the same number of people. But the difference is, instead of it being 4 or 7 strangers who are, in the Bahamas, it's or in Silicon Valley, it's 4 or 7 people who are from your community that your community has decided who they would be and you've known for your entire lived experience on. So out of the 2, the people that you've known, 4 or 7 of those, or 4 or 7 strangers who are incentivized just to take money from you, I know which one I'm going to trust with my money.
And the critical parameter that I see is also transparency, because in FTX I don't really know what is the governance process behind. Like in this federation,
which is quite ironic, because although but it's a really cool feature, and it's the community knows who the guardians are because they decided upon them, but the guardians don't know who has what balance because of the Chairman ecosystem. So they don't have the visibility on if they know there's 1 Bitcoin within that federation, and the community is 1,000 users, they have no idea how it's distributed amongst those 1,000 users and how it's being transacted amongst them because of the eCash protocol.
If you want to send me some Bitcoins, some Satoshis, and I'm a part of a federation, so what is the public like the address that I will send you? How does it work? Like, so if you send me some coins, it will arrive in one of those 4 boxes that, so concretely, I will never have the private keys. I will have like an access to an app, right? Access to a federation, which is working like.
So there's so many different questions.
Yes, but I'm trying to dig in.
But each one is a different answer. So first of all, let's say this federation is set up. Then you have users can join the federation. They join, a federation will have an address. It could be represented as a QR code. You download the app and you scan the QR code and you've joined the federation. The guardians don't know you've joined, even though they're the people who are running the federation, but you've joined. Now, you've said the first question you asked was sending money to the federation. My assumption, I think, is from outside of the federation.
Yes, exactly.
For example, because within the federation, it would just be a matter of it's an eCash system, so it means it's a bearer asset system. What I mean by that is each coin has its own individual hash. So if I wanted to send you €1.50, let's just say it was euros for simplicity, €1.52. If I wanted to give you in cash €1.52, I'd give you a €1 coin, 10 cents coins, and 2 1-cent coins. Well, you could do the same with eCash. There'll be a file, a very small file that represents a €1 value, and then there'll be 5. You'll send 5 small files for the 0.1. And then you'll send 2 for the 0.2. So you actually are sending notes around.
Within a federation.
So the guardians don't even need to see that. You literally can just send the notes directly to them. If you're outside of the federation, then you have the Lightning Network, which is this mesh network where people effectively send from person to person to person to person to get from source to destination. Well, and that goes through Lightning nodes. One of those Lightning nodes can not only be a member of the Lightning Network, but could also be a member of the federation. So they have eCash in the Federation, and they have Bitcoin in Lightning channels. And then what happens is, because the Fedimints are extensible, one of their features is the ability to emulate the Lightning network within the Federation. So anyone within the Federation thinks it's directly connected to the Lightning network. So back to you receiving money from the outside world, you have a Fedi app, you show a Lightning invoice, a normal Lightning invoice to receive money. Someone else who's got a Moon wallet or a wallet of Satoshi or a CoinQuadder wallet looks to pay that invoice. It goes through the Lightning network, point to point to point. The last point on that connection before you will be a Lightning node that's received Bitcoin, but it also has eCash within the Federation. And it makes a Lightning transaction for the last step, or it thinks it's making a Lightning transaction. But what actually is happening is it's just sending eCash in the last step. But from you and from its point of view, it's just done a Lightning transaction. From you, you've just received a Lightning payment, and it's looked like a Lightning payment. It's just the last step was eCash within the Federation. And the same the other way around. If I want to send money out, the first step would be eCash to someone who's running a Lightning node on the first hop, and then they will send Lightning on to the rest.
Okay, so you have this interoperability between like without and within the system. And one of the main pain points that we were speaking about is like, if I forget my private key. So in case I forget, or I don't know, something happens with my my app, or how does it work? Like I was within a Federation and I lost it, I forgot it. How do I retrieve my coins?
So this is another really exciting thing about working in a community context, where the community can come together to provide superpowers which you don't get if you are self-custodying or if you custody on an exchange. So when you have you also asked a question earlier about you don't have your private key and so on. You still, even if you don't have the private key for the community wallet, you do have a private key for your own eCash tokens that you are currently storing. There is still a 12-word backup that can represent all of the eCash that you currently have.
Within the Federation.
Within the Federation. Yeah. So now, just like any other 12 or 24-word backup, you could choose to back that up yourself, and then you can recover that. But the other thing you can choose to do is to take your private key and split it up into chunks and share that with the different guardians. And this can, if your app has been so designed, the Fedi app that's our app will be designed that way. It could be all done automatically, so you don't need to see it. But it will basically back your 12 or 24-word backup, cryptographically encrypt it, and then split it up and share it amongst the guardians. And so the guardians effectively can be holding that backup for you. And in the case of recovery, it could be something like a 3 or 4 multi-sig. So as long as you get 3 of them to return that to you, and they return that to you because they know you and they recognize it's you, then you can recover. So if you think about your 12 words, there's normally recommended guidance on how to back that up. And there's various different websites. There's the Glacial protocol. There's a 10x Bitcoin security protocol, all these protocols. They tend to be very long and complicated, but the summary is you should find 3 or 4 or 5 people that you know and trust, 1. 2, you should then split up your key cryptographically as well, not just split it up like 3 and 3 words. No, don't do that. You should cryptographically split it up. You should encrypt it, and you should share it with them. And then you should get them to check that their backups work every month forever. That's what you should do. And unfortunately, most people don't do that. But that happens automatically with Fedi. So you're following the best practice guidelines automatically without even realizing, by just clicking a button.
And you trust, and that's really what people must understand, is like you rely on social trust, like real trust, that the people
which you have to do with your 12-word backup anyway.
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
Unless you decide to dig a hole in the ground and not tell anybody.
Yeah.
But if you don't tell anybody and you die, then the money's gone.
Yeah.
So if you do want someone, for example, to capture in the case of you passing away, or you getting knocked in the head and you forgetting where the keys are, you can only do that if you somehow trust a second party, i.e. someone who's a friend or family, or worse, in my opinion, a third party like a lawyer or an exchange. But you have to trust someone outside of yourself to be able to recover it in the event that you are not around or you've forgotten it yourself.
Tell me if I understood correctly. So the e-cash inside within the federation, it's like a representation, a share of my part of the Bitcoin of the federation, like kept by the guardians. Like, I don't know, if we had a federation with 100 Bitcoins and I have 1%.
It is, but think about it more like the analogy I think that makes sense is you're going to a fairground and an amusement park, Disneyland Paris, for example. And within Disneyland Paris, they have a token system. And you come to the entrance of Disneyland Paris and euros are not allowed within Disneyland Paris. So you at the entrance, you give them, it's like husband, wife, 2 children. The wife comes along and gives the attendant at the kiosk 100 euros and gets back 100 euros worth of tokens of different denominations. And then they all walk in and then they take the tokens and she gives some to the husband, she gives some to the kids, and they go off. And maybe the kids are playing on rides and maybe one of their friends they see runs out of money, so they give them some of their tokens. Within the amusement park, within the federation, that token is now the bearer instrument. But it's only usable within the federation. You want to buy something from outside of the federation, and you're a kid, you could go to a friend who's about to go outside and give them one of the tokens, and then they go off and buy something outside, which is the equivalent of the Lightning Network, and then come back with that because you've given them a token, and they value that token because they know they can use it to play on rides. So yes, each one of those tokens is effectively a share in the total amount of money that's being held by the kiosk. Because the total amount of money held by the kiosk is exactly equal to the total amount of tokens. But a more natural way of thinking about it is each one of those tokens is its own bearer instrument representing that. But yes, if you added it up and you knew the total amount, you'd know what your share is as well.
What is the link? Is there any way to have a look like between the e-cash and the Bitcoin in reserve in the federation, like this proof of reserve that everybody is talking about right now? Is there a way in the app that, okay, I'm part of a federation that is theoretically, 1,000 e-cash in the federation, so I know that they are the Bitcoin kept and the guardians have not touched it, basically.
So perfect private. So one of our core objectives is to provide cryptographically perfect privacy. So the absolute perfection you can get. Now, just theoretically, if you have perfect privacy, you cannot have perfect auditability. It's just not possible to have the two. So if you want to add auditability, then you reduce privacy. But if you want perfect privacy, i.e. you can know without a shadow of a doubt that I can spend this money and there's no way that someone 5 years later can cryptographically monitor the blockchain and work out what I've done, then you have to lose auditability. And that's one of the things that is a limitation of the protocol. It's a feature as well. It's perfect privacy. Now,
it's like Monero versus Bitcoin.
We are very public about that. So now the way you compensate for that, one of the most important ways and fundamental is the proof of community. So we have you as a community come together and choose the most trusted people from your community. So that's the first thing you do. The second thing is we create a multi-sig where as long as a federation, it's effectively like a multi-sig for the Bitcoin. And as long as the majority of the guardians continue to act in a trusted way, it doesn't matter if one or two become bad actors, the system will continually provably go and operate in the way it's expected. So those are the first two protections. Beyond that, there are things that we continue to look at, etc. Ultimately, the only way to know for sure is to do what's called a run on the bank. You have to just take all the money off the bank and move it to another bank.
Yeah.
But some people have ideas about automated runs on the banks where, once every X months or years, they just automatically, because people can join multiple federations, just everybody just removes their money. And because we know that's going to happen at some random point, that's another check and balance. And by the way, even with proof of reserves and so on, my exchange, CoinFloor, had at the time the longest history of proof of reserves in the world. We did it for 8 years straight. You now see it's quite popular now for people to look at trying to do it. But we did it from the point we were launched in 2013 all the way to the point we were sold last year. And although it's an improvement, it doesn't guarantee that an exchange is not solvable. The only way you can guarantee it for sure is for everybody to remove their money. And so, because the Fedimint protocol is extensible, in theory, in future, you could add systems where you automatically just do runs on the bank and just withdraw everything off to another exchange. It would cost everybody a fraction of a penny because there will be Lightning transactions. And that's the beauty of integrating with the Lightning Network.
So what is the status of Fedimint right now? So it's already live production used by people. So we already at Hackers Congress this year. So 1 year, based on the 1 year anniversary of us first meeting, myself and my co-founders, started to allow people to make on-chain live transactions. So people were buying cups of coffee and so on and so forth. And we've done that a few times since. The plan is in next year, Q1, to roll out to a limited, so we've got a long waiting list of people who are really, and communities who want to be leaders in terms of adoption of this. So we plan to start rolling out to those communities in Q1. So it's literally only weeks away, and I'm here talking, but most of the team is just working around the clock to get the make it happen.
App out. So there's two different things: your Fedimint, the protocol, which we've been talking most of the time about,
and Fedi.
But Fedi is so Fedimint is already is out there and capable of production live transactions. But Fedi, an app that provides this incredibly simple, compelling experience, which shows Fedimint to the max, the potential, that is weeks away now.
And that was one of my questions. So Fedi is the company, Fedimint is the protocol. Like for example, Lightning Network is the protocol, and there are some companies building products and apps on the protocol. So Fedi will propose an app, right? Or the products. If I understood correctly, it will be an app.
So Fedi is an app, but it's much more than an app as well. So, but Fedimint is the protocol. It's like Lightning. You have lots of people working on it for passion and love.
Everybody
incredibly
can use
talented.
It. Yeah.
Anyone can use it and build upon it, and we encourage that. Fedi is a company, and its marquee product is the Fedi app. So the Fedi app is like a wallet, but a wallet which understands and speaks Fedimint protocol natively, and it can use and demonstrate the features of Fedimint to the maximum. But Fedi as an organization is much more than that. We say it's code, collaborate, and campaign. And the code is the app. The collaborate, also another way of thinking of it is consolidate, is we take the best of the Bitcoin ecosystem and we surface it within the app. So we help identify there's a number of incredible Lightning-based services out there that people don't know about. Within our app, you'll be able to see those, and we'll, over time, integrate very deeply with them. So you can click on the app, use it from within the app, and then when it comes to receive or send money or whatever that app needs, because it's being called within the Fedi app, you'll be able to use it in a very seamless way. So effectively, you can extend Fedi through all of these collaborations and consolidating the best. And then finally is campaign. We are in the early stages of acquiring and hiring a force of Fedi ambassadors around the world, focusing on Latin America and Africa, who will spread the word of Fedi and also all the other Lightning enabled services that we will be showing within the app, and also educate people on Bitcoin, financial literacy, and everything they need to maximize their usage of Fedi and Fedimint. And we think that's key because if it's just a technological solution without understanding the local context, or the educational context, it will limit how far it can grow. And we realize it's the combination of all those three things: winning by helping everybody win, which is the consolidation, having an incredible technology product to act as this platform, and then surrounding that with this sort of this force of passionate mini Renata, who you met, so head of community marketing, many Renatas, many me's around the world, just passionately educating people until we've onboarded 1 billion.
One question about the business model, because Fedi is a company, so there is a goal of profit. So how do you make money? Is it already on the table? So is there already?
There's a number of revenue streams. The first thing to understand is that if you have a product which ends up with hundreds of millions, if not billion plus users, there are multiple ways to monetize that.
You will find a way.
There will be multiple ways to monetize that. But one obvious way is that within the app, we will, whenever someone uses it to make a transaction, whether it's eCash or not, if you're using our app, we will charge almost like a pay-as-you-use fee, which will be a very small transaction fee.
Okay.
It'll be very small because we're about not earning a lot from a few people, but it's earning a very small amount from a very large amount. It's similar to the models, the revenue models for a lot of the successful Chinese-based products, where their business model is not to earn hundreds or on a few people, but earn $1 on a billion people. And that's the idea.
The two last topics and questions that I would like to ask you. First is Btrust. Yeah, like very, very quickly, because it's a very sensitive topic. Like sensitive topic in terms of changing the protocol. Like how do we also finance the developers? How do we, because they need to eat, they need to pay their rent, etc. So can you explain us a little bit what is Btrust, and what is the government's process behind to allocate the money of the fund or of the association?
So Btrust is a not-for-profit. It was originally set up by by a generous donation by Jack Dorsey and Jay-Z, the singer, who are both good friends of each other. And the donation was for 500 BTC to help, I like to put it as locate, educate, and remunerate Bitcoin open source ecosystem engineers from the global south, starting in Africa. And so that's our objective. And the idea behind that is manifold. One is all of the projects the reason why we're here and all the other Bitcoin startups around the world all rely on a vibrant open source ecosystem. And obviously Bitcoin Core is a big part of that. Lightning is another part. Fedimint is fast becoming another key part of that open source ecosystem. And there's many others, BDK, etc. So we want that to maintain, to be private, to be vibrant. Two, it's commercially, just logically and logistically makes sense to look in the global south, because your money can go further, you can support more people, and brain power is evenly distributed around the world. So again, commercially, it makes sense for our objective to support as many people as possible. And then finally, it makes sense because one of the biggest areas where it can help and provide value, the Bitcoin ecosystem, is in the global south. And there are unique problems and challenges and perspectives from this part of the world. So if you find the best engineers here to help add to the Bitcoin open source ecosystem, it can clearly potentially provide perspectives that will help prioritize what could be worked on, because they can talk about things not in theory that maybe this will be useful for someone living on a low cost economy. They can say, well, actually, I know this will be useful because that is my lived in experience, or that's my family's lived in experience. So again, that context can mean it's another example of where the global south, where Africa can lead the way to help the entire Bitcoin ecosystem. So that's what Btrust is about. And so, and how do we make decisions? Well, we are 4 board members. There was a very long, nearly year-long selection process for them. We started with 7,000 plus applicants, and it came down to the last 4 at the end of last year. and then we as a group of four, we're all, you know, running a businesses. Another one has his own venture fund. Another one is a core developer for Lightning. Another one heads up CC Hub in Africa. So that we all have sort of busy day jobs, but with our donated extra time, we are putting in place a series of founding principles. We've identified where we're setting up our not-for-profit, how we're going to custody, and then the final, most important task for us is to find the right person to be the CEO of the organization, which is what we're working on now. Okay. Once that person's found, they will have a remit with the founding principles as a base, and they will have the remit to be able to go off and deliver on the mission, and we'll just check
to
in
implement the strategy. Yeah. Because for me on my side, and I think many people have that in mind, is like how you decide to allocate funds and money to people, because
the CEO.
CEO.
You have to
as
give
my
that
point,
responsibility.
do you understand that some people can be afraid to have like this influence, you know, those fights, like, and some people say, okay, let's not touch the best layer anymore because it's too complicated to choose a direction.
Yeah, it's a challenge, but I guess that's why we were chosen out of 7,000 to sort of, we have different perspectives, past, present, and future of Bitcoin. You've got people who are in their early 20s, and then you've got me in my late 40s. So I'm obviously on the past side in that respect. And different perspectives, different angles to help sort of steer the CEO. But the CEO's job will be to run it on a day-to-day and make those decisions. And as long as our job is to be the guardians of the principles of Beatrice, which you can see on the Beatrice site. And they're all about being Bitcoin only, about being open, transparent, and so on and so forth.
Okay. Very last question. If you were meeting Satoshi Nakamoto, what would you ask him, or what would you tell him? That's the final question that we are asking all our guests.
I think if I was meeting Satoshi Nakamoto,
or him, her, or the group, but you understood my question.
If I was meeting Satoshi Nakamoto, I'd ask him how he's enjoying Ghana.